Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of Power Chord Productions and Podcastings. I am your host, Jerron Harrington, back to hit you with another video. And today, we are going to be continuing What If Cranel Was Thor? Danmachi, The Last King, Season 1, Part 2. As always, if you're a fan of today's video and everything else that we have to offer, then please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share, and hit that bell for post notifications so you can stay up to date on everything that is Power Chord Productions and Podcasting so as to come out now and in the future. Also, if you haven't, please check out our previous uploads from earlier in the week, as well as the special 2K Q&A video that was released last night. As we get into today's story, we continue the journey of Cranel, who must now stand trial for possessing a great power that has not been seen in over 500 years. How will the other gods take now that the power of Thor has returned to their world? And what will Bel do when a new member of the familia joins the team? As he continues to grow in his knowledge of the power that he has been blessed with, Bel must overcome his own anxieties if he is to master the power of Thor, as he now ascends to the throne of the Thunder God. For all this and more, stay tuned as we now continue What If Cranel Was Thor? Danmachi, The Last King, Season 1, Part 2. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Following the attack of the monsters, in 3 days' time, the meeting of the gods would commence. Bel would be rather nervous, Mjolnir by his side, as he stood next to his goddess, Hestia. The two of them, now in the presence of the other gods who had all gathered together. Bel had never been in this area before. A special place made specifically for the gods. The normal mortals were usually never allowed to enter, only under the extreme of circumstances. Bel seeing many of the gods that remained. Among them, he saw Lady Loki, and she was not too pleased with him at all. As the meeting began, the discussion was for obvious reasons. Cranel, a member of the Hestia familia, was in possession of Mjolnir, the weapon of the god of thunder Thor. Now, this brought many challenging circumstances, primarily because Thor himself disbanded his familia some time before the Great War. Bel had always heard of this war, but he could never confirm how much of it was real and how much of it was just tall tale. But here, he would learn the truth. About 500 years ago, the gods entered into a great battle against another deity. From where he comes, they do not know. But all they know is to be wary of his very name. So much so, that just to speak it sent chills down even the gods' spines. They would only say his name once. His name was Gorr, the God Butcher. For all of the gods that Bel could see now, there were many more that existed. However, during the Great War, the God Butcher slayed a many of them. It took Thor using his power to defeat and seal him away. Where he was, no one knew. Many believed that the God Butcher had long since died. Others feared that he may return. No one was truly sure of what was going to happen. But still, the fact that Mjolnir had suddenly appeared in the world after being gone for 500 years, this couldn't mean anything well going forward. But Loki had her own misgivings. While Loki, in her younger years, millennia ago, didn't get along with Thor on the best of terms, they had put their differences aside after a while, and had truly grown to respect one another and share love as siblings. That's why, when Thor disappeared after his battle with Gore, Loki took his death the hardest. As such, it was hard for her to accept that the weapon of her brother was now in the hands of someone like Cranel. Of course, Cranel had never done anything wrong. He wasn't a criminal. He wasn't a bad person. In fact, the gods knew of his kind and caring heart. But in the end, he just didn't look like an adventurer that was worthy of Mjolnir. They thought that it would be someone who was big, muscular, strong, someone who looked like he was chiseled out of stone. Bel was nicely put together, but the boy was kind of small. Loki was the most outraged of all of them. She demanded that Bel return Mjolnir to her, as she believed she was the only one capable of watching after it. Bel instinctively tried to give it to her. However, the moment he handed it to the god, it fell to the ground. Loki tried desperately to pick it up, but she couldn't. She couldn't lift it to save her life. Just like how it was back then, nothing had changed. A few others tried to pick it up as well, but they could not. And they knew why. The hammer decided who was worthy, and none of them were. Bel would move to pick it up once again, and he did so with ease, even being able to flip it into the air and hold it once more, like it was nothing. Bel noted that it felt more so like an extension of himself, more so than anything. When she realized that she couldn't take the hammer directly, she would then make another play. Loki would then ask that Bel be made a part of her familia, deciding that if anyone could help mold him into the proper hero, one capable of wielding that weapon, it should be her. After all, her familia were strong and capable, and Bel could be trained under a much better fighter. Someone like Ice would be perfect. However, Hestia would rebuke this very notion immediately, stating that, in all fairness, before Bel gained this power, before Bel gained Mjolnir, when he tried to join other familias, they all turned him away. He tried desperately to find a home, and none of them would give him one. So what right did they have to take him now, simply because he possessed something that they were after? This angered Loki a bit. While Hestia understood where Loki was coming from, knowing that Thor was her brother, in the end, Thor disbanded his familia long ago before the Great War. And as they have known, Mjolnir is only possessed by those who are worthy enough to wield it, and Bel is the only one. As such, it was his property, and since he was already under her familia, no one had the right to take him away. After thinking this over, the gods had to come to the agreement. Realistically, there was nothing saying that Bel couldn't use Mjolnir, since he was worthy enough to wield it, and there was no justified cause to take him out of his familia. Of course, Hestia understood that from now on, they would be the center of almost everyone's attention. They would always have the eyes of people coveting the power of Thor, or the one who can wield it. But with the meeting adjourned, they would leave. All the while, Bel was a bit more worried than anything else. As they made their way back home, Bel would apologize to his goddess. He didn't mean to cause her any trouble. If he had known that, he never would have picked up this hammer in the first place. However, Hestia would tell him not to apologize for such a thing. Bel was blessed, but for Bel, he was also a bit worried. Was he truly worthy of such a power? In the end, he had never been that remarkable of an adventurer to begin with, and even now, he knew that there were others out there who could have been just as worthy as he was. However, Hestia would look back to him. She looked at him seriously and poked him in the chest, specifically his heart. She noted that yes, there were adventurers that were taller than Bel, muscular than Bel, ones of whom it seemed as though they were truly heroic. But in the end, Mjolnir cared for none of those things. What truly mattered what was in the heart, and what Bel had in his heart was far greater than what 100 adventurers could ever have. And while she would help him in any way that he needed, the one thing that she would never stand for is for his lack of confidence within himself. Because for her, in her heart, no one could be more worthy than him. Bel would thank Hestia. Whenever he felt as though he were down, she was always there to encourage him, to lift him back up. He was truly grateful for her. A few days later, the guild's attendant, Aina, would take Bel out to a blacksmith's floor in order to get him some better armor that he could use while in the dungeon. While looking around, Bel didn't see anything that truly piqued his interest, except he did find one set of armor that he liked well enough. It was made by a blacksmith named Welf Crozo. It was a light armor, a simple chest plate, shoulder guards, as well as wrist guards as well. It was simple enough that he could add to what he already used. It felt light, but it was strong and durable. And it was a good pairing for his weapon, Mjolnir. Seeing what he had chosen, Aina wasn't surprised, as Bel was always one to get the light side of armor, seeing as how his quickness was often his attribute. He thanked her for taking him out and getting a chance to upgrade. However, Aina also suggested that he hire a supporter to help increase his efficiency while in the dungeon, and someone that could help watch over him. And before leaving, she would give him a special wrist guard, one that could be used for defense. He was worried and he offered to pay her for it, but she knew that he wouldn't need to, and that this was her gift for him. She had come to see Bel as a younger brother, one of whom she had great affection for. She had seen many adventurers die in the dungeon, and she didn't want that fate for Bel. Even with his newfound powers, and as he was growing in level and strength, there was always the worry that she would have over him, and as such, she wanted to keep him safe as much as possible. Bel would once again thank her. As he prepared to make his way back home, Bel would stop when he saw a fellow adventurer named Ged attacking his supporter. The young girl, small and frail, Bel would move in for her and guard her. Using the wrist gauntlet that he had been given as a defense, he blocked against Ged's sword. Ged was now angered, asking why Bel was getting involved, and asking if he even knew who this girl was in the first place. Bel remarked that he didn't know, but that he couldn't just stand and let someone get hurt. Ged would become annoyed, thinking that was a stupid reason to get involved, as he raised his sword once again to strike at Bel. However, he would be stopped by Ryu, a fellow worker at the Hostess of Fertility Tavern. the elf girl making it very clear that fighting out in public was very unbecoming. Ged was a bit annoyed. That was until he saw the look in her eyes. One that suggested he'd be best to keep himself silent and to leave. As he left the alleyway, Bell would thank Ryu for her help, though when he looked around for the girl, she was nowhere to be seen. The next morning, Bell would put on his armor, with Mjolnir by his side, and with a new short sword that he had just enough to purchase as well, carried on his other side. He would set off to make his way to the dungeon. As he had done so, from out of nowhere, a young girl would walk up to him, asking if he were looking for a supporter, and she was offering her services. Bell recognized her from the day before, and asked her if she was alright, and where she had come from. The young girl introduced herself as Lily, and she wanted to show her appreciation to Belle for helping her yesterday. And if possible, she wanted to show what she could do as a supporter. Well, Belle didn't really have anyone else that would be willing to work with him, and he decided to take her up on that offer, to see how things would work out. They would go and explore the dungeon, Bell continuing to fight against low-level monsters and improve in his power and skill. Bell would also test out what he could do with Mjolnir. The hammer in and of itself did surprisingly enough damage. Bell was able to throw it, and with enough focus and concentration, it usually always came back to his hand. He was also able to test out fighting with two weapons at once. One problem that Bell had, though, was he wasn't really good at using magic, and as such, he couldn't do what he thought he had done before. He remembered he used some kind of lightning attack, although he couldn't recall what had happened with it. But for now, his skill was rising slowly, the hammer was very effective, along with his short sword, so there was nothing to worry about. And also, Lily was a good supporter. They were making good money together, and everything was going fairly well, although Lily was keeping a close eye on Belle. While Belle didn't have anything that was really worth much of note, that hammer, that seemed like it might fetch a good amount of money. After some time, Belle saw that he was making a decent amount of money. As such, one evening he offered to take Hestia out for a date, since he wanted to show his appreciation for her and to thank her for everything. Originally, Hestia wasn't feeling all that well, but when Belle offered her to go on a date, her mood instantly changed, and she was going to make preparations to get herself ready. They would pick a location, and the next day, that was where they were going to meet. Hestia would go to the baths of the temple, a place specifically for the gods, where there she would meet a fellow goddess, Demeter. All of the other goddesses would instantly want to know more information when they learned that Hestia was getting ready for a date. Hestia tried to keep this news to herself and tried to avoid all the embarrassment that would come soon after, though that would shortly be lived, as when the time of the date actually came, Belle waiting in the town square for Hestia to arrive. Before she could even get close to him, all the other goddesses, including Demeter, had followed her, and were now swarming around Belle. The boy they heard carried Mjolnir by his side. They were all swooning around him, and Hestia was now becoming more and more annoyed. But what finally drew the straw that broke the camel's back was when Demeter grabbed Belle a little too close, and the boy found himself red as a tomato, squished firmly in between her bosom. With that, she would grab Belle by the collar and would drag him away immediately, the two being chased all across town, before they had managed to escape from their pursuers. hiding out in a bell tower of all places. While the day hadn't gone exactly as they had planned, on the bright side, they get to see an amazing view. From within the tower, they could view all of the town, and it looked amazing. And they hoped that maybe they could have another date together, although this time without so many people chasing them around. In the meantime, Belle and Lily would continue on with their adventures in the dungeon. Everything would be going well. As they had stopped to take a break, Belle set down Mjolnir beside Lily as he went to go and search for something off in the distance. Lily, seeing this as her chance, tried to pick up Mjolnir and leave with it, but it was impossible. And it wasn't because she were of a smaller size. Even the biggest of men in the town and square wouldn't have been able to lift that thing. Belle came back and saw what she was trying to do. She looked desperate, like she really wanted to take it. Belle walked up to her and asked what was going on. He asked why she would be trying to steal his hammer away. Realizing she had been caught, there wasn't much that she could do, when instantly they were swarmed by monsters. Belle looked to Lily for support as he summoned Mjolnir to his hand. However, instead of helping him, she took his stones that he was going to turn in and all of his money and just started to run away instead. Belle called out for Lily, asking what was going on, but she said nothing as she ran. However, Belle could see from under her hood there were tears streaming down her face. Belle would dispose of the monsters. After making his way out of the dungeon, he would go all around to look for Lily. He searched all over the city until eventually he arrived home to drop off his things. He told his guide, Hestia, what was going on, and Hestia could see that Belle was truly worried about this girl. But for his own safety, she questioned if they should be getting involved in something like this, if they could even trust her after what she tried to do. But for Belle, right now, none of that mattered. The only thing he cared for was finding Lily and making sure she was alright. Understanding, Hestia would help, and the two of them would continue to search through the town. They eventually found a ran-down tavern. They would hear a commotion coming from it as they made their way, when the doors would fling open and they saw Lily being flung out of the tavern itself as she fell to the ground, battered, beaten, and bloodied. They ran to her side immediately. Belle looked towards the tavern in anger as he saw Ged, as well as other members of the Soma familia, as Hestia explained. They all looked down upon them and laughed. As they looked back towards Lily, they asked if she was alright. They said that they had gotten what they had wanted from her, and in the end, she was of no use to them. If they wanted to take the run-down little runt, they were more than welcome to. Belle wanted to fight them instantly, but Hestia would tell him not to, and that now tending to her wounds was more important. Belle would pick her up, and the two of them would walk away. But as they did, at Belle's side, the members of the Soma familia saw Mjolnir. It looked like a fine weapon, one that could fetch them a pretty good amount. And they thought to themselves that maybe they weren't done with him after all. As they made their way back home, they would tend to Lily's wounds. They asked her what was going on and why she had been treated like this by her familia. Lily would begin to break down and cry as she told them of her backstory. She was born to parents that belonged to the Soma familia, making her a member of the familia from birth. However, her parents didn't care for her. In the Soma familia, the only thing that anyone cared about was that wine. Soma, their god, and the one of whom was the man of the familia, made a wine that was so intoxicating, one that was so indulgent, that just a single sip could have you drunk down to the depths of your soul. Her parents, the only thing they cared about was getting that next sip, so much so that they ended up getting killed in the dungeon, leaving her alone to fend for herself. The Soma familia didn't care about her. They only bullied her, left her alone and isolated. The only thing she was ever good for was earning them money. She tried to be an adventurer on her own, but she just wasn't strong enough. So instead, she tried being a supporter. But yet every time she worked with fellow adventurers, they always screwed her over, leaving her alone. As such, she grew to hate them. And instead, if they were going to use her, she would use them instead and steal from them before they would take everything from her. Because of her small size and stature, she could never fend for herself the way she wanted to. Finally, she had enough and she ran away, where she met an elderly couple who treated her nice and gave her a home. However, the Soma familia found her. They inflicted misery on the old couple. They ended up destroying their home and stealing their money. She had no choice but to go back to them, and ever since then, she had been trying to buy her freedom, but she could never gain it. It didn't matter how much she got for them. It didn't matter how much she scammed and worked her way. It didn't matter how much she gave them. In the end, they always wanted more. The price for her freedom always went up, always just out of her reach. She tried to hide herself from them. She even noted that for Master Bell, she skimmed the money that they were supposed to split evenly. And he was the only adventurer she had ever met that decided to split things 50-50 in the first place. But she would split it 40-60, 70-30, sometimes even 20-80. She would always charge him more than what was needed, and he just seemed to go along with it willingly. She wondered if he just didn't care, if he was just that stupid. And in the end, she just couldn't take it anymore. She tried to steal Mjolnir. She thought that maybe that could give her the funds she needed to get away, that she could be free. But she felt foolish for thinking that, for thinking that she could ever have her freedom. Both Belle and Hestia were moved. They understood why she did what she did. She had been through so much. As she continued to cry, Hestia would pull her into her arms. She held Lily, allowing her to cry herself to sleep. That night, Belle, he hardly got any rest. All he could feel was this growing sense of anger welling up inside of him, like a raging storm that would not cease. Early in the morning, they would hear a call coming from outside. Both Belle and Hestia, along with Lily, who had awoken and was standing close behind, they would see that their home was surrounded by members of the Soma familia, all of them brandishing their weapons. They yelled out incessantly at them, stating that they wanted that hammer. If they gave it over, then they wouldn't have any problems. But if they didn't, they were gonna burn them and this entire stinking home to the ground. Hestia would move forward, telling them to leave immediately. But the men, either being drunk or stupid, didn't even care. Lily was now worried. The only people who had ever truly been nice to her, they were going to potentially be hurt beyond all compare. Lily moved forward before Belle and Hestia could do anything. She offered to pay them 10 times worth what that hammer was if they promised just to leave. She wouldn't ask for anything. She'd work herself to the bone if need be. However, they just laughed some more, noting that she was worthless to them. In the end, she couldn't do much, unless she was willing to sell some other goods. They knew some people that liked girls rather small, and if not her, they could definitely do something with that short and busty girl standing next to her, as they leered at Hestia. The moment Belle heard those words, Mjolnir would come flying into his hands. A dark storm cloud would form around them all, the winds beginning to move violently. Belle walked forward. Both Hestia and Lily tried to stop him, but he did not turn. He only told them to stay where they were and to not move. There was such a boom in his voice that commanded great respect, one that made them both stand in their place. Even the goddess, for a split second, trembled at his words. As Belle walked forward to the group surrounding them, the men, none the wiser, tried to attack. However, Belle would jump into the air before kicking them in the face. As he used the Mjolnir, he would throw it at them, the hammer flying and coming back to him just as quickly. As more winds were summoned, they pushed them all away, knocking them around. Even the leader was starting to become fearful. As they looked, they saw that Belle's eyes had completely changed. They were no longer their normal red, but they now glowed an ominous white. As he looked down upon them, dark storm clouds seemed to have now surrounded the entire area, as if nature itself was fighting with him. Say that again. I don't think I heard you. You think you're going to do what to my goddess? Belle walked up to the leader, now on his knees, as Belle looked down upon him. Let me make this very clear to you, because I am only going to say this once. You will not take this hammer. You will not take Lily. The only thing you are going to take is your life, because that is what I am allowing you to keep. And if you ever so much as think of my goddess in any way that is not paying homage and respect to her, if you so much as dare to cross her presence, you won't have to worry about your god Soma anymore, because your life will be in my hands. As Belle looked down upon them, he issued his final warning. The day you cross me will be the day that you make the last and sorriest mistake in your life. Now go! The winds and the rain fell upon them, the thunder and the lightning crashing violently. The members of the Soma familia got up and ran. They were filled with fear, fear beyond all compare. They knew that there was nothing that they could do now. Nothing at all. As they ran away, the skies that had now been filled with darkness became just as clear as they had been that morning, and Bell found himself passing out immediately the moment Mjolnir was returned to his side. Once he was taken in, Hestia would check his status immediately. While he had grown somewhat, his experience hadn't changed all that much. But where he was able to summon that power, she couldn't tell. For those wondering how the power works, think of the power of Thor similar to that of the powers of the Avatar and the Avatar state. It's a power that Bell has to learn to master, but it's not a power that he can summon willingly right off the bat. You see, as Bell continues to grow and train, the stronger he becomes, the stronger Mjolnir will become. Or rather, the more power he will be able to tap into. For a better explanation, think of One for All from My Hero Academia. How Izuku Midoriya can't use all of One for All right off the bat. Essentially, this is the position that Bell is in. I would say that as of right now, Bell can use about 3 to 4% of Thor's full power. Maybe 5 if he's pushing it. But as he continues to level up, so too will Mjolnir. And the more he levels up, the more power he will be able to take from Mjolnir. Right now he's still at the basics, but he will continue to grow in time. However, due to the blessing that Bell has, whenever his emotions flare and go high up, for a brief moment, he can tap into more of Mjolnir's power. But that's only when his emotions are truly high, when he's truly at the end of his rope, and when he needs to turn the tide of battle. For a brief moment, he gets a major boost in power that can allow him to win the fight, but he must do so quickly, as prolonged use of the power could result in lasting damage to Bell. A short time later, Bell would awaken to find both Lily and Hestia caring for him. He would be told that he had actually gone up a few levels, and that he had actually acquired a new magic skill. Bell was surprised, and he asked what it was. Hestia would note that he had 2 new abilities added to his arsenal. They were named Thundershock and Lightning Bolt. Bell wasn't sure of what these new powers were, but he couldn't wait to try them out. He could feel himself slowly starting to change. He asked what happened exactly with the Soma Familia. He remembered getting angry and riled up, but he blacked out shortly after. Both Lily and Hestia looked at each other shocked. He really didn't remember what he had done? What power he unleashed? This only left them even more confused. But for now, they were safe and there was nothing to worry about. Lily would again apologize for what she had done, and if they wanted her to leave, she had no problem doing so. However, both Bell and Hestia would laugh, saying that why would a fellow member of their familia leave? Lily looked at them shocked. Despite everything she had done, they still wanted her to stay. Hestia made Lily promise that from now on she wouldn't have to lie or steal anymore. That if she needed help, she could trust in them. And she also made her promise to watch after Bell while in the dungeon. The 2 girls started to become a bit more clingy to Bell than normal, each one holding onto his arm rather tightly, looking at one another, not only as a familia, but now as potential rivals. and Bell was none the wiser to anything that was happening around him. They enjoyed a special dinner together, and before long, both Bell and Lily would begin their journey together, now as members of the Hestia familia, as they made their way into the dungeon. However, unknown to Bell on this day, his next trial would await him. This concludes What If Bell Cranel Was Thor? Danmachi, The Last King, Season 1, Part 2. As always, if you're a fan of today's video and everything else that we have to offer, then please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share, and hit that bell for post notifications so you can stay up to date on everything that is PowerCore Productions and Podcasting that has to come out now and in the future. Stay tuned for tomorrow's video, as we are going to be continuing What If Naruto Was Trained by Dr. Strange? Naruto Mystic Adventures Shippuden, Part 4. But anyway, that's going to do it for the end of today's video. I am Javon Harrington with PowerCore Productions and Podcastings. Signing off, and I'll see you next time.